chasing no more. Tell me what I want, just keep searching on. It's never enough. Cup after cup.
1 in 5 teens suffer from a mental illness. Young teens encounter many challenges in their development, with many being left to face them alone. Over 75% of mental health problems occur before the age of 25. Young people are less likely to seek help than any other group. Depression can create a conscious fear that merely provides anxious thoughts, leaving young Australians in an unbreakable cycle. Suicide is the biggest killer of Australians. Although, when looking at COVID-19 and how young Australians have dealt with such enormous amounts of stress, and how COVID-19 has indicated the power of technology in connecting a strong positive online community, showing that in times of need, the online world is here to help. We've kept our distance, but we've never been more connected. All it takes is one text message. Even if you aren't experiencing these feelings yourself, you can still promote our website by downloading and promoting our poster, and then you can help aid in the betterment of these people's health. As the more posters being promoted, the more likely that no matter who or where these teens are experiencing anxiety, depression, or anxious thoughts, they can still find our website and feel as though they belong. The voice of the unheard. We're in this together. Hey, have you seen this new website? thevoiceoftheunheard.com. We're in this together. Through my who, what, when, why, how structure, I have effectively clarified the intentions of my major works construction by identifying technologies, resources, materials, and processes relevant to my statement of intent, explaining by identifying the cause, and then stating that as a result of this, the cause happens. By supporting the appropriate selection of materials, processes, technologies, and resources that follow my research and statement of intent, as this continues to develop my project. Demonstrated through my idea generation, developed into working drawings, developed into prototyping, where I further evaluated on my selection of materials and processes by modeling and testing. I then demonstrated my very high skills in sketching in my working drawings with my first storyboard, and then developed that into my second storyboard that aligned further with the statement of intent, research, and selection justification of my resources, processes, materials, and technologies. I have explained my modification through identifying the cause and effect of this change, then analyzed the succession of my project in not following this modification, and then the succession in following this modification, with my main focus being how does this modification affect the relationship between my statement of intent and my project. I have developed my timeline plan through Gantt charts. I have applied my timeline plan through my weekly summaries and my actual sections of my Gantt charts. I've evaluated my timeline plan through ongoing green evaluations and also the evaluation section within my portfolio. I have developed my finance plan through expense tables. I have applied my finance plan through estimated/actual expenses and applied through my tables and graphs to ensure that I am limiting costs. I have evaluated through evaluating my overall costs and evaluating my actual costs over my predicted costs. I have clearly described the production of my project through my step-by-step process. I believe I've been succinct as I have clearly described my steps of production. Although some of my steps are quite large, I believe they are authentic representations of my record of production, as the degree of difficulty in some of these steps can't be simplified into a simple sentence because the step is too complex to be simplified. Through evidence and documentation, I have effectively demonstrated my wide range of OHS practices. Through my demonstration of my wide range of techniques and skills, which are included in my ICT, I believe I've been effective as these skills have aligned with my statement of intent, indicated in my selection justification, and shown in some cases in my ICT skills set. Example number 1. COVID crisis. COVID dramatically changed the filming processes of my video because I had to film during lockdown, or my timeline plan lined up with filming in lockdown, and obviously I couldn't. Although I did come up with a resolution to lockdown as I learned how to 3D animate in Blender and to visually represent what I would have done in film in an animation. Example number 2, my structure. As originally this was meant to be a story orientated video, but it shifted into more an informational type video. I didn't want the audience to come up with their own interpretation of what I was trying to say. I wanted it to be obvious, I wanted it to be factual, and I wanted it to be purposeful. I wanted them to know exactly what I wanted them to know, and the only way in my head that I could come up with a way that it would only have one interpretation, one meaning, one idea, is to actually tell them, is to use facts and figures and a voiceover and a narration that was purposeful, unlike my story-orientated video. And thus, due to these changes and due to COVID, my project has actually changed for the good as it has evolved. I've improved my depth of understanding, it's more sophisticated, the techniques are more advanced. 3D modeling. This was definitely my hardest techniques, especially with the skyrise scene. This was due to it being my first independent Blender project, but it also is the largest scale, and I wasn't using a tutorial, as what I was doing was just, I couldn't find a tutorial for what I wanted to do. I added this due to the COVID lockdown restrictions. I needed to add scenes into my video, but I couldn't actually go out and film because you weren't allowed to, so I did it all digitally. Although I would have preferred to go out and film these scenes with my camera, I believe I've implemented them fluidly, especially with the creative transition that I did with the sunset, how it went from real sunset footage to Blender sunset footage just to make the transition more seamless, which doesn't distract the audience into a level of disbelief. I did this through implementing real life elements into my Blender renders. For example, my skyrise, I have myself composited in and then tracked. I did this to add a level of realism and also to suit my purpose. Another example of this being my train scene, which I overlaid my already recorded train station footage. Another example being the world lockdown add-on, motion tracking and masking. This was a technique that I took forever, it took like 3 weeks. It was when I motion tracked my emoji over the top of my actor. I did it manually, and I also did it with motion tracking because I originally started with just motion tracking. I made like a red little overlay over his face with like contrast and color correction so that you could just have the true alpha colors, so that it's easier to just pick the color and then track it. But I obviously couldn't do that because there was a mask. I had to mask over the hoodie. So then I had to go back. I canceled that idea and I had to do it manually. I did frame by frame and I moved it and adjusted it. For my whole project I did that. And then more motion tracking with my text message overlays, which some of it is motion tracked, like with the drone one is where it comes in and it scales. But I wanted to make the animation myself because when you track something, especially with the keyframes, the scale can change. So with that scene, as it's coming closer, I had to do the scaling myself. I keyframed that and then I tracked it in with a 3D motion tracker, Camera Track.